Right. Hey, friends.
Hey.
Welcome to SparkToro office hours.
Whoop, whoop.
Whoop. All right. We have our folks in the chat saying where they're from. We got people all over the world, which is
All
always
over
super fun to
here.
see. We have people in Spain, Germany, Pennsylvania, Minneapolis,
Switzerland, Boston.
Switzerland. This is great. An icebreaker question for everybody. What was the last show that you binge watched?
Ooh, Succession is so good.
It is really good.
The Diplomats.
I will say, though, for me, it's a little bit of the best show I never fully understood.
Yeah.
Because there are parts that I'm lost, but I'm like, I love it so much. I don't care. Cool. And as we get started, so Brittany, I wanted to ask, you've been learning about machine learning for a very long time and working in this space for a long time. What attracted you to machine learning?
Yeah, I think my initial interest was piqued probably way back in 2014 when people started to announce like data scientists will be the sexiest job of the future and have all this opportunity at their fingertips. And I wanted to understand why that was. And I remember going to GitHub where I thought all of like this technical information lived. And I did a search for, I think it was machine learning. And I stumbled across Harvard's CS 109 data science course from kind of like the back end GitHub repo where they were uploading their courses twice a week. And I started following along as if I was in the class. And that's really where I was introduced to this idea that computers can train themselves and they do a really good job at accomplishing different things designed depending on how it's kind of architectured. And that just blew my mind. I have like never thought about things the same since and was instantly hooked. And it kind of became my new outlet like SEO was initially, where you're just hungry, you're curious, you want to learn all the things. And yeah, I became obsessed, like truly obsessed.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long have you been in this space now?
A very long time. So back when I was doing, like I had a marketing company in Denver for a couple years, but in my spare time, I was like creating my own MNIST models on my computer and walking around the office, like showing people how it could recognize handwritten numbers. And that's sort of like the hello world of machine learning models. It's something that's actively in use today, and like post offices use it. And yeah, that was a long, long time ago. And so it's been like in this like hobby love space of mine. And then I made the jump into like the AI industry 2 years ago. And last year I had the privilege of working at one of like these unicorn AI companies called Hugging Face and learned a ton. And yeah, I'm just excited to kind of continue my journey.
That is awesome. And I asked because I don't know a lot of people in the machine learning and like data science space. I'm always fascinated to meet new people, and especially folks like yourself who have such a strong marketing background as well. Like the way that I think our community is trying to understand and look at AI, GPT, LLMs, which friends you will learn all about soon. Like the way that we're looking at it, I think is exactly like something you would empathize with. So super excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited because I think this field in particular, I mean, we already have so many technical individuals with SEO and technical background there, but the possible applications are incredible, right? Like wielded in the correct ways, this can save you loads of time, automate the things you don't enjoy doing, and really take your career and your work to the next level. And all it requires, honestly, is like a sprinkle of curiosity and just a little bit of effort getting there, getting started. And then, people will come up with incredible applications for marketing and SEO. So super
Are
excited.
there are there any like maybe even just mundane everyday things that you're using, GPT or AI for that maybe most people don't think about?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's so funny because like when people use the term AI, we
Yeah.
we really haven't reached AI, right? And so, like, it's all
Mhm.
machine learning or different forms of automation. And so
Mhm.
when I tell people the story about when I was living in Colorado and there was this little mom and pop deli across from my office that had these specials every day, and I loved their meatball sandwiches, and I was so sick of going to their website every day to check. And so
Mhm.
I wrote a script that would just crawl for that on a cron job on a server and send me an email in the morning if it was on their website. Now that's not machine learning, right? You can do forms of automation like that that do something very, very well, and they're very lightweight. They make a ton of sense and they do something perfectly. That's not AI and ML. That's not what they're designed to do. Where
Mhm.
it starts to get really fun is where you want to like categorize pages at scale. Um,
Mhm.
but it's funny you ask like, what do I use in my everyday life? Like I have these really lofty dreams of incorporating AI and ML into my everyday life, and I invest in different like small tech, like Raspberry Pis. I've created all sorts of things for family members and stuff. And those NFC tags, so near field communication, the one I
Mhm.
use the most. I was going to do all these cool things with those. The one I use the most, I swear to you, is this one I drew like a really childish looking clock on it. I put tape on the back and I slapped it to my dryer. And what it does is after I put in a load of laundry, I just swipe my phone across it and I get a buzzed notification in 45 minutes when it's done.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's like, and it's so silly, right? I just like, I
That's
hate those
so cool.
buzzers. I hate,
Oh, hate it.
yeah, noise pollution. So that's like the one I probably use the most, which is ridiculous. But it's little things like that, you know?
I love that. You made your own smart washing machine.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to
Yeah.
spend all that fancy money. They're literally less than a penny on Amazon. You can program them yourself.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's so funny to me because I set up the app on my LG washing machine to be, okay, I need it. I need the notifications. I need this. I probably spent more time doing that than,
Yeah,
than what you did.
you could do it. It's so easy. It's so easy. Oh my gosh.
People
I
are
love
always
seeing
doing
this too in the chat. I'm doing a
yeah.
degree in data science inspired by Brittany. You gotta be kidding me. That is so cool. Also, and I'll get to this in the talk, that I
Yeah.
truly believe, and I have felt so confidently about this for probably 5 years, that foundational data science knowledge will be so important in the future. Like even like just the foundational elements of how to navigate large data sets, how to understand a distribution, right? How to like explain and communicate about data effectively will bring so much value to people's lives that incorporate that and do that. So that makes me so happy. Yeah, so excited
Oh,
to do
I
that.
love that. I think that's the perfect way for us to kind of start here. I'll do a quick intro of you. Let's get through some housekeeping first, and then we can get started.
Cool.
So, friends, welcome. I think most of you probably know the drill. You can use the live chat to drop in your reactions, maybe some questions. There will be some interactivity in this session, which I'm super excited about. And then we'll also, of course, save time at the end for Q&A. So we'll do both. And then lastly, you will, of course, be able to watch this as a replay. As soon as this event is over, it'll be available on this website, but you'll also get a follow up email with all this good stuff. And so, with that, I want to announce our guest speaker. We have Britney Muller, founder of Data Sci 101 and seasoned marketing and machine learning consultant. Um, what's really interesting about Britney is many things, but just her roles as her prior roles in marketing at Hugging Face and also as a senior SEO scientist at Moz. So she comes to this with a really strong foundation of technical knowledge, expertise, but also with like the empathy of a marketer. So she really knows how to talk to us and break this all down in ways that are probably most salient to us. And really, you know, Brittany is a keynote speaker. This is what she does, right? She breaks all this down into accessible concepts, and makes it a lot more palatable for, I'll just say, folks like me to understand. So with that, please welcome Britney Muller.
Thanks so much, Amanda. That was a lovely intro. So thrilled to be here. We're going to have so much fun. I have designed this talk to kind of lay the groundwork of large language models, AI, how we should be thinking about some of these things, what to be aware of. And then I'm going to let all of you build on top of that. So as I go through this, please feel free to jump in the chat, because this is sort of like a choose your own adventure that I'm super excited about. So I'm gonna start my screen share. Let's see how this goes. Okay. And now I'm wondering, can I still view the chat in another window?
Oh,
Here.
it might depend on your setup. If you can't see it, and if you like, I can like interrupt you now and then, you know, not in the middle of a sentence, but to keep you apprised of what's going on.
I think
are you able to see the chat?
Yes. And you're able to see this, correct?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay, cool. Sweet. So yeah, let's break down large language models and how to navigate them. I first want to be really clear. I think this is a topic that a lot of people don't feel like they're qualified enough to learn about or to play with or to speak about. And that's honestly not true. Like, everyone belongs here. You belong in this conversation. And quite frankly, being a novice to this tech with your specific marketing and SEO background can give you superpowers. And I have a quick example as to why that is. You can outperform more experienced people by looking at these problems differently. There's this awesome thread on Twitter by George Mack where he talks about how this individual that I think was a tax worker, had no experience in detective work whatsoever, thought of this idea of identifying a serial killer by parking tickets. So, I mean, this is just such a cool concept of, you don't have to be an expert in a field to come up with some really smart out of the box ways to apply things. So I'm happy you're all here. I think you already deserve a ton of credit for learning about this. And I feel very honored and privileged to be a catalyst of this information. And I'm so excited to hear what you all think of and how you apply this and the types of solutions you use this stuff for, because that's what makes this so fun. And so to lay the groundwork, there's a lot of confusion around, you know, is large language models AI? I saw that in the chat already. And it's important to note, AI is a large industry. And within this industry lives machine learning. Within machine learning lives deep learning. And now, large language models actually come from the field of natural language processing, which combines computer science, AI, and linguistics, or human language. And so it's an interesting overlap, but it's important to establish how we're speaking about these things and how we're defining some of these terms to talk about them appropriately. So in order to answer that question I just said that was raised in the chat, let's look at these two things in particular. There's currently, you know, we think of AI as two different types of intelligence. There is narrow intelligence that is very task specific. So it does one particular thing very, very well, like Google Translate, fraud detection, customer support. And then we have what's known as artificial general intelligence, or AGI. This is generalized knowledge of the world, and we currently have not reached that yet. This would eventually possess common sense, have the ability to plan and reason and navigate new situations. We're not there yet. And so all we currently have is narrow intelligent models. And while AI has sort of become this new new age marketing term that everyone's using for everything. Large language models are not true AI yet. And it's not, I'm obviously not setting the laws of how we speak about these things. You can do as you wish, but it's a machine learning model that is very, very good at generating text in addition to other things.
So
But
as we know it, like Chat GPT, Bard, Bing Chat, these are examples of narrow intelligence.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They're the best narrow intelligence we've seen because they do a variety of natural language processing tasks, but they're by no means generally intelligent. And I think once people also kind of learn how, just a little bit of how they work, you'll understand why that is too. But yeah, I would love to hear what are some other examples of narrow AI. If you think of any or currently use any, it'd be super interesting to hear. I'm only going to refer to AI now as MLMs. That's hilarious.
Right.
Yeah, the terminology is super important. It was funny when I really started working more in the AI space. This became a common theme in conversations with researchers. And at first it felt a little bit like, oh, come on, let's get to the good stuff. But it is so important. And the more I learn, the more I recognize how essential this foundational, definitional agreement and kind of awareness is for people to be able to talk about it appropriately. Mm-hmm. Those are great examples. Wow.
Otter
Otter's awesome.
Yeah.
Big fan. Jasper, Descript, Whisper, Imaging. Yep. Those are all perfect examples. And so what are large language models? Amanda, you've already made note that, Chat GPT, Bard, Bing, which is Chat GPT, right? These are the large language models that we are commonly aware of and use today. And it's important to recognize, what are they? This is something I thought about that I would love to see in chat. If someone asks you, what are large language models? What answer do you currently give? And there's no real wrong answers here, right? People explain large language models in a lot of different ways.
So how do you all describe LLMs? I guess I kind of just think about it as extremely large databases of words.
Yeah.
Or terms.
Yeah, I love it. Stochastic parrot, that's a great one. Unfortunately, I feel like most people probably don't know what that means, but that's a great way to describe it. Sentence GPT, hilarious. Google large language models. They are the brains of AI tools. Never been asked. All the words in the universe. Yeah. These are really good. A large amount of data. Yeah. Okay. So
autocomplete on steroids.
These are great. And I would love to put kind of add some more color to that. So one thing to be very clear of is that large language models are not search engines. They are not by nature information retrieval systems, nor are they deterministic. Instead, they generate these randomized outputs based on a probability distribution. And now this might all sound a little like, what does that mean? And I'm going to show you what that means. Because it's this alone, this definition, and the fact that they generate randomized outputs answers so many of people's questions. Yes, what's the statistical likelihood of one word following another? Exactly. Randomized, but explain better, please. I love that because the sampling strategy is key. So let's go through that. Okay, so these large language models take essentially all of the internet, right? They take all of the text available to them online, which think about the content on the internet. Think about what it is that lives out there and how it might not be the most ethical representation of views or information. There's a lot of inherent problems with training a model on an uncurated, massive data set. I love this quote: feeding AI systems on the world's beauty, ugliness, and cruelty, but expecting it to reflect only the beauty. It's a complete fantasy. And unfortunately, a lot of people just hope that that's the case. But again, the way that these large language models are currently built, they will have inherent problems. And I made this really silly graphic to kind of represent these, like, this is behind the closet of a large uncurated data set. There's bias, there's misinformation, there's racism, sexism, ableist, you name it. These inherent views are baked into our history, right? And the way that these models learn, they will pick up on these patterns. They will learn some of these viewpoints, unfortunately. I'm just checking chat. Isn't that quote so good? It's so good. And yeah, you're right. No one talks about this part of it, which is wild to me, because this is inherent in large language models. There's currently no way around this other than putting guardrails on some of the output, which quite frankly does a really shit job at controlling some of these things. There's so many what's known as jailbreaks and ways around this information. I have been able to do quite a bit of that, unfortunately, and you really do get to see what the model truly believes under the surface, which is terrifying.
Yeah, which is why, like, when Bing first came out with their chat and it went off the rails like immediately,
Yeah.
I imagine that you probably thought, like, yeah, what did you guys think was going to happen? That's literally what we've been feeding this robot, or this model, all the
Yes.
years of, like, hate, racism, misinformation. Like, that's what came out.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Amanda, that's exactly what I thought. And something a little scary is so many AI researchers compare these self-trained models as like children, like babies, right? They sometimes get things right, and they sometimes make really kind of comical errors. And spending time with my little niece and nephew recently, my nephew just turned 2, and he is a master at manipulating me. I mean, it's embarrassing. And so I was thinking, like, he doesn't know like all sorts of things, but he's so good at manipulation. And I thought of what you just mentioned, the New York Times, the Kevin Roose reporter dealing with that, and it trying to like manipulate him out of his marriage. Unfortunately, like, it follows similar behaviors and similar patterns that are a bit terrifying. And I don't mean to anthropomorphize these models either, because that leads to a whole nother host of questions. But the parallels are very interesting to think about. Don't all skeletons have fat phobia? That's funny little joke. I was actually just on the Midjourney office hours yesterday, and someone raised the question that every time I ask Midjourney to create a person with diabetes, they're all overweight. And that's not representative of every, different types of diabetes. And that's a great example of, like, because there's more information on that side of things, it will hold those views. It will surface that information. Children are sociopathic, truly. Kevin Roose, yeah. Oh my gosh. They are violent subsets of society. Oh my God, it's scary. Here we go. Okay, so how does this work? So you enter something into ChatGPT. I put in learning about LLMs is, what is it doing on the back end to create an output for this sentence? Here's what it's doing. So again, I had mentioned this probability distribution. It is looking at all of the previous sentences that have had learning about LLMs is. It's essentially contextualizing everything it's seen with this sentence and organizing the words by the most probable next word. Something really fascinating about this process in particular is that the slope drops off quite quickly every time. And so there's this, range of words that is then used and scrambled to the degree of which the engineers decide to produce output. Now, let me ask something to the chat, to you, Amanda. Why wouldn't LLMs pick the most probable word every time? Why wouldn't they do that? Or why don't they?
Let's see. Why don't LLMs pick the most probable word every time? Well, I wonder if that's where the randomized aspect comes in, because you mentioned earlier there's a randomization along with probabilities.
Yeah.
Joshua says to simulate original thought. I wonder if it's that.
Yeah. Or did I made Nigel ask, how did these percentages come about? I made these up. This is a made up example. Large language models essentially do this on the back end through a multidimensional space that I don't want to get too into, because I feel like that's when I start to lose people. I've noticed when I start talking about tokens and embeddings, it's basically a giant knowledge graph that it's been able to create in a multidimensional space that has these parameters, these weights between associations of words. And so it leans on that. But again, that's essentially what this is. It's what's everything it's ever seen. What is the most common next word? How is it doing that? And why doesn't it pick the most probable word?
So I guess also what you're saying with this table is that as LLMs are trying to choose the next likely word, it's probably based on some factor of like what's important, interesting, beneficial, difficult, boring, or rewarding.
Sorry, I kind of lost you there.
Oh, sorry. Oh, just that like the table that you have here of like the way LLMs as we know them are working are like behind the scenes. It's trying to parse through what it thinks is most important, interesting, or beneficial to the user that's prompting it.
It's actually a bit more simple than that. It's really looking at the most common next words. That's it. It's just what's the most common next word after this string. And if it were, let's say we create a large language model and it picks the most probable word every time, something really interesting happens. It gets super redundant and boring and very dry and painful to read. It is, someone had mentioned in chat, like it sounds like a computer. It's really, it comes up with pretty bad text. It just starts, I've seen one large language model that I worked on at Hugging Face, Bloom, just repeat the same sentence over and over like 6 times, because I had the sampling strategy too low. And so that's why the randomness is really important, because it does start to come up with more interesting, spicy output. And we can recognize that we want human sounding like output. That's why ChatGPT has done so well, is they have kind of cranked up that sampling strategy. They've what's known as a temperature. And I like to think of it, this is my little memory trick if anyone wants to steal it. The higher the temperature, the spicier the outputs, right? The more randomness that is incorporated into the model. So you might see really interesting and creative outputs, but it's going to be less factual. Now think about Google's Bard, right? Remember, oh my gosh, Joe Hall had the funniest tweet about this and how ChatGPT felt like a friend, like over drinks or something, and Bard felt like a weird stranger in a hospital waiting room, because it's so, they've ramped down that temperature because they want it to be more factual, right? Google has a whole lot more to lose, right? They've got this huge reputation. They've earned everyone's trust and respect, and they want to be very careful. ChatGPT is willing to kind of crank that up a bit more, which is why you see the different kind of personalities or like styles come out of that. This is why there's a bunch of LinkedIn posts that all look the same. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And so I'm so glad someone said like it really is spicy autocomplete. I had not heard of this until Rand said something. It was so funny to me. And I brought it up during this like online conversation with some of the most respected AI ethicists in the world. So like Emily Bender, Margaret Mitchell, Alex Hanna was there. There was a couple others, and they said something really interesting that I do tend to agree with, which is spicy autocomplete doesn't do large language models justice, right? The capabilities that large language models have inherently from all of this training can do so many fascinating things, and they can do so many fascinating things very, very well. And we'll go over what that is. Okay, so yeah, so what we just explained, this probability distribution, this can help answer so many of people's questions. How can I get an LLM to surface my information? Anyone want to take a guess? Right? If it's looking at all of the text it's trained on, what is the most common? This is actually my fear of educating some SEOs that enjoy black hat or spam, because the way that these are made, they are highly susceptible to spam, right? And so I'm very nervous and trying to kind of brace myself for that future a bit, because if you're able to spin up a bunch of BS information that covers large swaths of the internet that these large language models grab a hold of to train on, you will have a much higher probability of being surfaced in these large language models. But again, this probability distribution, so why aren't they factual? Because they have that randomness, right? And unfortunately, when a large language model starts to come up with misinformation, it gets compounded based on how much text it generates. And people need to be aware of that, because a lot of people are taking these at face value, which is quite scary. And they're very confident sounding. They're fooling a lot of people. So yeah, they are not inherently factual by any means. You should not be using these for data retrieval of any kind. Yeah. And why do you get different outputs with the same prompt? Again, there's this randomness, or stochastic is what, the scientific word for it is. And so that's where stochastic parrot comes from, is because it's randomly, there's an element of randomness, stochastic. Parrot, that's just parroting back information that it's seen online. That's what it's a giant word calculator. It's a giant word guesser. It's a stochastic parrot. How do we know what they train on, though? Oh my God, that is the golden question, Jennifer. That is like, this is what everyone's talking about in the AI world right now. Is a lot of researchers have problems with the fact that OpenAI, that's now very closed, doesn't release any of this information, which means trying to investigate and discover levels of interpretability of the model next to impossible, right? You're not able to do any sort of digging to determine why it generated a specific potentially harmful output if you don't have that access to the data. That's such a great question. Yeah, how crazy does it make you that people use these for research? It makes me sick to my stomach. I actually talked to someone at an agency recently, and someone was using ChatGPT to identify where competitors were doing ad placements. And again, you got to remember, this doesn't have access to the internet. And in fact, it only has information up until October 2021.
Right.
So it's just crazy how this fools people, because it's seen enough of those examples probably online that it's one of the best con artists of our time, because it just is able to kind of replicate what it's seen.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of what we're seeing is like a new wave of like fortune telling or something, right? Where fortune tellers give people a cold reading, right? Where this cold reading is based on a bunch of factors rooted in bias, like
Yes.
based on your age or your gender. What are you most like? What are the problems that are most likely to be top of mind for you?
Yeah.
And they kind of craft this custom reading for you based on all these probabilities, and it feels real because it seems true, it seems real,
Yeah.
therefore it should be real, right? Like that's
Yes.
what kind of worries me about this, that it seems legit, it seems
Totally.
true.
That is like the big problem, right? Is people, and I have a lot of empathy for that too, though, because I mean, how are people supposed to know any better? I think it's the
Yeah.
responsibility of people promoting this technology as products to make this way more clear to individuals using it. Because the other scary thing that actually has been giving me nightmares is not only are these things not factual, but the way in which you put in input, like the way in which you phrase a question to be answered in a certain way, will continue to feed this confirmation bias to the nth degree, right? And so that's a very scary thing. Someone had mentioned the election content is going to be, absolute shit show. And you're right, Andrew. Very scared about that. How about the use of content creation using past data? A lot of opportunities there that I do have slides for. Yeah, general public, people believe this to be true. It really bothers me. And the other thing that really bothers me is this is blown up so quickly, that I'm seeing a lot of people doing quick cash grabs with this and selling these products that say that they do one thing really, really well without educating the users. And it just feels really gross to me. So this is something I'm super passionate about, is teaching people, like, there are certain things to use this for and certain things not to. Yeah, I'll keep an eye on chat, but we can start to go into what they're really good at, right? They are really, really good at language translation. That is, if they've seen enough of the language, they're able to translate language from one to another quite well. Incredible at content summarization. I love using them for this. There's a bunch of applications with this alone that I have another slide for. Writer's block, if you really just can't even get started with something or don't know how to reach out to someone just to get some ideas, it's super helpful. We know that they're good at content generation. Sentiment analysis, they're really good at. They're great at question answering. Again, these won't necessarily be factual. They're able to personalize text. I love the stylized writing. You can get it to write like Shakespearean oven cleaning instructions, like that's incredible. Well, maybe few people can do that, but like very few people can just do the stuff like that instantaneously. Refurbishing content for social, I see huge opportunities there. Simplifying long or complex text, correcting spelling and grammar.
I love it for that.
Yes, I need that so bad. I'm the worst speller.
Yeah. Well, it's great when you're trying to fix things that go beyond hitting F7, right? Where you're just like,
Yes.
it's like the sentence seems weird to me. The sentence I wrote seems weird.
Yeah.
Can this thing check it for me?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And the other thing too with that is if you're trying to get a specific output from these large language models, use them to help them craft your prompt, your input text. Explain what it is that you're trying to do and what the best possible prompt to accomplish this thing might be. They're really good at helping with prompt engineering. Even for like Midjourney, if I'm having a problem creating an image to look a certain way, I can ask ChatGPT for assistance and it does really well. My personal favorite is the programming assistant or writing and debugging code. Oh my God. For those of you that are, have dabbled in Python and programming languages, you have no excuse. Like, this is the world's best programming assistant. No longer do I have to feel guilty about asking all these engineering questions. I can just kind of go nuts on ChatGPT, and it is incredible what it's allowed me to build recently. I'm so excited for people interested in programming and building things in particular with no previous background to use this technology to really assist them in what they're trying to accomplish. Junior developers love it. It's so powerful, so powerful. Run it through to catch all those missing semicolons. Seriously, Jamie, I've done that. That's so funny. Tools for storing the info people enter for prompts and using it somehow. I have a resource for prompt engineering at the end because I don't think there's one catch-all solution for prompts, and I think it's dangerous that SEOs are kind of offering that right now. It's such an iterative process because what you're trying to do in your type of content will not look the same as someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
Does this all make sense? Should we go to what they're bad at?
Yes, let's do it.
Why do we trust that code written by GPT is okay, but language is sketchy? Good question, Travis. I personally trust it because it works.
I guess it's easier to validate.
It's very easy to validate. Mm-hmm. I'll be in a collab notebook and I'm able to know within seconds whether or not that code is valid. And if it ever generates something like sort of sketchy or a library I've never heard of before, I just do a little bit of due diligence and I look it up. Mm-hmm. Right? I make sure they didn't find this on Tor and it's something nefarious. That's a really good question, though. Yeah, help generate art and JavaScript and Python. And the cool thing about code, the last thing I'll say here on that is code, think about programming. It is inherently designed to be unambiguous. That's why it's so much better at producing programming text and information, is because it's not ambiguous. Language is so ambiguous, right? Depending on where you are, the social situation, your group of friends. I mean, it's different across the board of the same language. So this is why I really love to harness large language models for programming. Cool. All right, let's go to what they're bad at. Being factual, right? They make very ridiculous errors that look very confident and might look very factual. Something to probably be most aware of all of this slide deck. Common sense, they're very bad at that. They don't represent marginalized group. Remember, they train on all the internet. So they're not able to understand and represent people that aren't on the internet or maybe live in really small pockets of the internet. Super important to be aware of that representation. They're terrible at data retrieval, don't know current events. I would not trust them for high-level strategy, certainly for ideas, right? But they're not inherently good at planning, reasoning, logic, navigating completely new, unforeseen ideas or concepts. This is actually really interesting. They're so bad with humor and jokes. Like GPT-4 has gotten a little bit better, but computers have a really hard time understanding humor, which is interesting. They're bad at making generalizations. They're not environmentally friendly. The carbon footprint of training, I think GPT-2 was equivalent of driving to the moon and back. And these have just gotten larger and larger and larger. I think, 2 is also compared to like the full lifetime equivalent of 5 vehicles. And GPT-4 is orders of magnitude larger. Lateral thinking ideas. How can they be good at coding but bad at math and counting? That's a great question, Brendan. I love that. Okay, so I touched on this earlier, but coding is built to be unambiguous. It is very specific. The syntax, everything is very, very specific for different programming languages. So there's no real variability in programming languages. Now, math and counting, it is terrible at coming up with accurate numbers, right? The problem with the numbers is you ask it to generate, let's just say someone wants to ask it the average monthly search volume, please don't do this, for a keyword, unless you're just testing it, and then run it a couple times. It's just going to generate new numbers, right? This is a large language model. It's not a large numbers model. And programming languages are languages, and they're unambiguous. So I hope that helps answer that. Yeah. Yeah, it's just not good with emotional intelligence, consistency, math, counting. Now, how do we think that these can improve? Or how are the companies that are currently behind these models working to get them to improve on their outputs? Now, granted, the things I just mentioned, what it's inherently bad at, a lot of these things, because of that probability distribution, will forever be inherent with large language models, right? They will never be information retrieval. But how can they improve? What are they doing? Okay. Transparency. I wish they're doing kind of a sprinkle of 3 things. Knowledge graphs, that's an interesting thing. I love that name. I'm going to say it wrong. Allura, knowledge graph to help with retrieval. So there's this thing in AI known as stacking. And it's when you put different kinds of models on top of each other to increase performance for certain things. That's a possibility down the road, but we currently haven't figured out how to do that with large language models yet. Certainly not in the public domain. So the 3 ways is they continue to feed it additional training data, right? OpenAI will continue to feed it more text that's more current on an ongoing basis to try to improve its output. Human feedback. A lot of people don't know this. When you use these models, you are helping to train the model. So you have to be really careful about what it is that you feed these models. I know several AI ethicists that refuse to even use some of these for that reason alone. And then the third thing, and granted, they're not just using public users' feedback, they have a whole team that's dedicated to rewarding these models for good outputs. And I have a graph of what OpenAI's architecture looks like for that. And then they have guardrails, basically fat band-aids that they put over these models to try to get it to not spew toxic information that it's learned. Yeah. So here's the OpenAI reward loop from human feedback, which is super important to be aware of because I've seen more and more people use this tech in ways that they probably shouldn't, right? Like, do not feed private information that you wouldn't want them to regurgitate later. This is super important. I've heard of doctors putting in private patient information, or, like just even private financial information, you name it. Super important to be aware of. Yeah, like social media with GPT, you are the product. Colin nailed it. That's very, very true. We are literally the product. We are training these things. And the scary thing with this earlier slide is this human feedback is also so prone to, hacking or spam. We saw this in Bing, and I don't want to go into too many details because I don't know that they've necessarily fixed this. But the way in which you interact with these models can affect what they surface and how they're answering things. So, yeah, and I know researchers are currently working on ways to fix some of that, but it's an inherent problem in this reward system. Yeah, bad actors are doxing people and feeding in bullshit. Totally, Rich. Totally. Okay, oh my God, Andrew, thank you. How do we know that LLM isn't spamming ChatGPT with enormous erroneous or biased prompts to infect the model. Okay, this is actually what's very scary too. That is possible, Andrew. So a lot of researchers have been talking about how these models will eventually be photocopies of photocopies of photocopies. And some of those photocopies are generated BS, right? So it gets more, the more they train on more of this growing spam, automated, generated information, the more problematic that becomes, for sure. And that's where I think hopefully we come back to the basics and think, oh, wow, bigger isn't better. We need to be super, super thoughtful about how we curate the data that we're training this stuff on. That would solve so many of these problems. But unfortunately, researchers at OpenAI discovered, no, the more text we just feed into it, the better it does generally over all of these domains. And so unfortunately, those corporate interests are not aligned with public good, right? Are not aligned with protecting people all the time. Yeah. Okay, that's a great question, Rich. Do plugins improve LLMs or just extend their capabilities? Oh my God, there's so much plugin noise. I have mixed thoughts on this. I think they can help kind of plant some ideas of what it is that they can do. But your best use of this technology is pulling this API into something like Google Sheets or, you know, something that you use and iterating on what it is specifically you want it to do. Again, the prompt engineering is a very iterative process. The same prompt won't work for everyone. And so those plugins are sort of these like one size fits all, which in my experience has generated really poor outputs. Yeah, the plugins use the API that goes into the same database. Yeah. Nigel's pissed. Yeah, cleanse our private data. Yeah, there's going to be a lot. It's so funny. So with this technology, I also think of, remember years ago when like personalized marketing started coming about, and wasn't it Target that sent like pregnancy information and like products to a young girl's house whose parents didn't know that she was pregnant? Things like that, I think, will start to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people's private information will become like leaked out in very weird ways, depending on how people use this inappropriately, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wild. Target. Yeah, I thought it was Target. It is like Cambridge Analytica. Well, that's how I feel sometimes. A lot of people are unhappy with some of the things I'm saying, and that's fine. That's totally fine. The future of LLMs, we can touch on this briefly. I believe there's only going to be a handful of these core large language models. I've talked to several, excuse me, VCs recently that are real interested in investing and building these large language models. It doesn't work like that. Like people underestimate the amount of money and the amount of time and the type of engineers. I mean, it is so extreme that it's only available to a very few of the tech giants, and it will only be available. Other companies will build on top of them. They might do some unique fine tuning to get it good at a particular thing, but they won't inherently build their own large language model. Issues with privacy, bias, toxicity, and harm will continue to occur. These are great, valuable tools, right? Wield them in the right ways. And just a time check, Amanda, how are we doing on time?
We technically have 5 minutes left.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, if you're good on time or if you can go over, people can also just tune in. If people have to drop off, they can also tune in to watch the rest later.
All right, here's applications for SEOs and marketers. Code assistants. refurbishing content for social, summarizing page content for meta descriptions and titles, categorizing page content I've had a ton of success with. It does this very, very well with, again, the right iterative prompt approach. Writing outreach, filling out content briefs, skills for the future. I'm going to double down on this. Data science 101 knowledge that incorporates how to look at and understand large data sets, how to clean them, how to talk about them with foundational statistics knowledge will get you so far. That is like, that's where it's going. That's what you need. Learn how to fish, know which AI models do what really, really well. There's different lures for different fish. There's different models for different tasks. You got to be willing to learn new things. You got to be willing to fail and break stuff. Soft skills, right? Like we're going to be asking ourselves like what it really means to be human more and more and more. And that will be so important, obviously, in the future. Skepticism, oh my gosh, especially in this marketing world that we live in, do not believe everything you hear other marketers say about this tech. Do approach everything with, just skepticism for your own sake. Let me know if there's other skills you think belong here. Learn how to ask great questions. Ricardo, I love that. Yes, Kathy, critical thinking. Oh, those are so good. Learn how to ask great questions. So important. Quickly run through resources. This is the prompt engineering you have to check out. Super short. Andrew Ng explains it all way better than I ever could. And I don't know this lovely woman's name, but she's phenomenal. Midjourney, Amanda, this is supposed to be us on the right. I asked it to generate an image of us on a webinar about AI, and that's what I got.
It's uncanny, really.
Right, we look great. Midjourney is super fun. You just get it to generate all these incredible images based on unique prompts. Collab notebooks. People tend to be really scared of these for some reason. I'm going to have some content come out soon that helps walk through some of the stuff, but this is the best place to run some of these ideas through. It's really user-friendly, and it's going to be better and better and better. Google actually just announced something today that makes it even better, and easier for non-technical people. Little plug here. I am working my face off on this, how do large language models like ChatGPT work? I have all of this great information coming on data science and foundational stuff you need to know. So if you put your email in the Data Sci 101 site, I will give you early access to this large language model content. Okay. Check out the large language models themselves, play around with them. Be careful what you enter them, obviously, but play around with them. Test it with this summarizing text. Take a screenshot and play around with testing some of these things because it's really, really good at that. It's also really good at generating text, obviously. So play around with some of these things. We'll share all of the slides. Thank you so much for subscribing. I'm working so hard on this stuff. It's become like my child. I'm super proud of what I'm putting together, and I'm confident that I am thoughtfully curating the information that specifically marketers and SEOs need to know moving forward. And something that will also be incorporated into some of those like more advanced efforts will be Chat or GPT for Sheets. I love this. Again, this puts the power in your hands. Instead of using some of those plugins, I highly recommend taking the prompt engineering class with Andrew Ng and using this first. This will turn you into a superhero. It's incredible what you can do with this. Even like looking at reviews, I mean, it's really, really cool. Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000. Emily Bender and Alex Hanna have a Twitch stream that they do, I want to say once every 2 weeks. It's phenomenal. They put this like very realistic view of what's going on in the AI world right now and why so much of it is just bullshit, hype, eugenics. It's scary. But I have so much respect for these two brilliant researchers, and I love their stuff. It helps a lot. DARE, Distributed AI Research Institute. This was founded by Timnit Gebru, who is fired from Google when she spoke out about large language models 2 years ago now. So check out what she's doing and putting together at Dare. They're doing unbelievable work. They have great content. Yeah, highly recommend. Okay. Oh my gosh, this book will make you cry, but it's super important, and it is one of the most like in your face reads of how impactful these things already are to underrepresented and underprivileged groups of people. Oh, I like get emotional talking about it. Thinking in Systems, super, super powerful book, will totally change your perspective and allow you to have more higher level conversations with C-suite individuals and allow you to kind of work through some of this AI stuff and what might fit and what might not. Natural Language Processing with Transformers. This book is so awesome. It's by 3 of my old coworkers at Hugging Face, and they're some of the most wonderful people ever. This is a very technical book that is in an accessible format. So I highly recommend checking that out. I also love this one, Deep Learning with Python. Really goes into neural nets if you want to dive deeper. Kaggle is really wonderful for their courses and their data sets and just getting started with some of these things. And then that was it. So I know
That was awesome. Oh, I think it just kicked us out.
No! Really?
Did it just kick us? It just did. Oh no, we're still here. Okay.
Oh,
that's super weird.
like, what did I do?
Because it looked like for folks in the chat, like it changes the interface, so it looks like we're backstage. Anyway, okay. I'm glad that you're still here.
Sorry.
Britney, that was amazing. Incredible. Thank you so much for this and for leaving us with so many helpful and comprehensive resources to go through. I'm so excited for this. Like, thank you. And of course, we will share the slide deck. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And feel free to hit me up on Twitter or, I don't know, email if you have other questions. Just britneymuller@gmail.com. And then, yeah, wherever you typically put the slide deck, that works for me. So
perfect. And I'm just going to drop this into the chats and stuff.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks everyone for attending. Honestly, the comment section really made this. Like, that was so fun.
Right?
That was so fun.
We have a pretty incredible community here.
Yeah, you had said that, and I had seen it in some of the other ones, but that was really cool.
All right. Well, with that, friends, thank you for joining us. You will get the replay will be available as soon as this ends. You'll also get a follow-up email with the recording, with the slides, and hopefully, if I can get my act together, a blog post all in one handy-dandy place.
Yes. So excited. Thank you so much,
Britney. Oh, gosh. Thank you. Very kind. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Brittany. Bye.
Bye.